Today we're going to do a quick lesson on what to do if you mess up your cable. The cable you're looking at is just fine. Unfortunately, the area where I'm working is not fine. See right there? I should have gone one more row moving stitches out before this happened, and I didn't. So rather than having a conniption, let's just fix it. It's not that bad. First thing I'm going to do is the thing you're terrified of doing, but don't worry. I'm just going to pull this off the loom. Now I'm going to pull out rows until I'm back at a good spot in the cable. If you pull gently, nothing happens except what we want to happen. I think I need to go one more. Yes, because that stitch was knitted the wrong way. Okay. Now we have straight lines that trace outwards and can continue tracing outwards. Now I'm going to use a circular needle. See the strand that comes off of the needle itself? And load all these stitches onto the needle. It does not have to be a particular size that you would knit with, because we'll just preserve the stitches, put them back on the loom, and the loom is determining the size. I'm just using the circular needle as a convenient stitch holder that goes into the stitches easily, and because of this nice long cord or strand, it doesn't drop them. Okay, mostly the disaster is now averted. Let's put it back on the loom. Because this is a circular needle and therefore has an actual needle part on both ends, I can start on whichever end I find most comfortable. And this time I've decided to start on the right hand end. Do make sure to orient the fabric in the same way that it originally was on the loom. I think I have it right. Now we're just going to move the stitches one at a time off of the knitting needle and back onto the loom. The loom tool works well for this. Some people like a crochet hook. I personally prefer the loom tool. You can even just use your fingers. Watch this. This is true on this gauge. On a really small gauge, fingers wouldn't be the easiest way. Now, unless you were really careful and attentive, you may possibly have twisted a stitch. I don't worry about it at this stage. I simply check them all when the stitches are all back on the loom before I resume knitting. Let's talk a minute about lifelines, because people assume that that's the way you prevent the trouble that I had, or actually the way you solve the trouble. They don't prevent you from making a messed up cable cross. They prevent you from losing all the work if you make one and have to go back. I personally do know how to use lifelines, and I've made a video on it, but I hardly ever do. I prefer this technique. It depends, of course, what you're doing and how finely you're knitting. But this is so simple and straightforward. There are ways to fix a cable down in the fabric by laddering back only the stitches that you need. I don't really recommend them for this particular project because you're going to spot the problem pretty soon with only maybe 3 rows to unravel. And I think that this is the better and less complex solution in that instance. This would have been a knit row coming over. So I'm going to finish that stitch. Now, let's look for twisted stitches. I may not have any. I don't see any. So I'm going to twist one on purpose so you get a look at it. Let's see, look down in there. You can see that the 2 strands are tighter together than a normal knit stitch. And that should give you an indication that you want to pull back the previous stitch. Yes, I can see a twist. I imagine you can too. And it's clear that we should lift it and put it, orient it, and now see how the strands come out parallel, but not quite as tightly when the stitches are not twisted. So I'm ready to resume the proper pattern. No tears. Now, how did this happen? I know how it happened to me. I was talking at the same time as I was knitting, thinking I was keeping up with both, and plainly I was not. Oops, here is something I need to fix that can also happen. See that? It should be behind the pin. The stitch is on there correctly, but remember how we always knit behind the pin? Otherwise the work will hang up. Make sure that happened every time. So we'll read across and make sure there are strands behind the pins for every stitch. Another way you can mess up your cable is by failing to follow the chart very carefully. It's maybe a good idea to make multiple copies of the chart so that you can X off your rows, and that'll help you keep track.